before, and then just copy it across here, because if you just start from here, and especially when it comes to the answer, it gets really complicated. So I'm going to just pull across some text from a question, which looks like this. And here's the question. And you'll notice that the variables have got curly brackets around them. So you can see there's theta, and that's actually the only variable in this question. And then the answer that's required has got double curly brackets around it like that. And that's all explained actually here in the tool. I don't know if I'm going too fast, Shanali, but anyway, here we go. So I'm going to drop it in there. And what Vula does is it looks for what you have put in the curly brackets, and you have to insert those variables. And it looks for what you have put in the double curly brackets, which is the answer that the students have to input, and then you have to put the formula in for that answer. So when you hit, so there's my text, the details of whatever course this is or whatever discipline or whatever it is, doesn't make too much of a difference. And there's a button here. I mean, you can see there's a lot of explanatory text here, and it's pretty straightforward. You'll see it explains about the single curly brackets. It explains about the double curly brackets there. And so that's what I've done. Just one variable, single curly brackets. There's the double curly brackets. That's the answer I'm looking for. So the students have to say the magnitude of the force at A is, and they have to give the answer there. And I say extract. And then what it's looking for from me is it's looking for that variable theta, which was the one in the single curly brackets. It's looking for a minimum, maximum, and it's looking for a formula here for FA, which is the force A. And so what you do is you just put a minimum and you put a maximum, and how many decimal places? We're going to say none. And what I normally do over here is I actually just say, oh, sorry, it's my phone. I actually just say, I just say like that. Let's just have that for the moment, because I do it in 2 steps. And oh, it has to have a formula. So let's just do that. Theta plus 1. Hopefully that works.
Brackets, Bruce.
Oh.
Curly brackets on the theta.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Pierre. As I said, Pierre is the master here. So theta plus 1. No equals there. Okay, that's the first step. I'm going to stop there because otherwise I think I'll probably go too far.
Folks, so very quickly, any questions for Bruce before we go a little bit further? Brandon.
Bruce, you had a maximum and minimum there. What is that? Is that the range that's going to be presented to the students? So they're going to get random numbers in that range? Correct.
Yeah. So those are the unique value that the student will get between those values there, those minimum, maximum, and then I think that's just the answer then.
And I see you set the decimal places to 0. Does that mean that they're discrete numbers then? It'll be 37 and 39. Okay.
Yes. I mean, should I go on? I don't know. I don't want to hog the show here. Shanali, you must guide me here.
So I think, Bruce, if you would continue for a little bit, and then I think what's really helpful is and then after that, if Pierre would like to jump in a bit, or if you would like to have kind of work together on it and just share how you're going to, as Pierre did just now, jump in, please feel free to do that. I think that's helpful always, just to see where people are with these things.
Cool. Okay. Well, you know, what's nice about this is it's actually helping me because I'm actually busy setting the test. So here's the question.
Useful time.
Yeah. There's the question. You can see there's the diagram. It's got some fixed values. It's got that unique value, that variable, and then it's got the final answer there. So I've actually developed a memo already. Did it just while we're setting up here. So here's the memo, and there's the answer. And so what I've done is I've left the variable theta in working through. There's the variable. So So this this value alpha has a theta in it, and these forces, which is what the students required to calculate, also have their theta in it. And so in the memo, so of course normally in the memo you would have a it would be a single value, and you would just work it out here. So all I do when I'm doing my memo is I just leave theta as the variable. And so this is now what I have to put in the double bracket for the force FA. This is what I have to put in there, okay? And what I find to be helpful is if you actually just use Excel, because you want to make sure that the total, the final value that you have, so for me it's force at A, the total force at A, you want to make sure that for a range of variables, everything works here. And if you just do it straight in calculated questions, it's quite difficult to know if that range is going to work. I mean, normally you could have 2 or even 3 or more variables here, and you want to just check that the range for all of those, you take the minimum of one, the maximum of the other, and you just change it around. And I normally just have a long list down here and fiddle around to make sure that all the variables, all those unique values that a student might get, they will all work for the final calculation. And I find it's quite useful to use Excel before I put it into the calculated question, because the syntax is pretty much the same. So let's just take this quite straightforward one. So here's the force at A normal, and I've calculated it to be 156,96 cos theta. So here's my force at A. Shall I enlarge that a bit? Normal. And there's the XL formula for it. So it's 156,96 multiplied by cos of A2, which is my theta, times by pi divided by 180, because it's in radians. So this is given in degrees, and just XL needs it in radians, and also Vula needs it in radians as well. So if I just take this, and what I'd do is I'd find the force tangential, and I'd add those together using Pythagoras to find the total force. But let's just use this one. And so what I find to be useful here, if this is the formula, I'm going to take it down here and copy it over here. Okay. And so that's what it's going to look like when it goes into Vula, with a few minor changes. Okay. Now, if I take it across, well, let me just do this first. So the block A2 is going to be my variable theta. So I must remember my curly brackets, and I'm going to put theta. Okay. Close my brackets. So that's what I've got. So that's how it's going to go into Vula. So I go into Vula here. And I go back to my calculated question. So here's the question. I edit it, and I go down. So there's the question. Here is the variable theta, and I put it between 25 and 35 degrees. No decimal places. And this was just my sort of a dummy variable, just to make sure everything was okay. And what I do is I replace that with my Excel syntax. Okay. The only difference is here, for pi, XL needs an open and closed bracket after pi, but Vula doesn't. So you can actually take that out. Okay. And
can I interrupt you for a second and ask you, does Vula follow many of the XL? If I use, instead of pi divided by 180, if I'd use radians, which you can in Excel, would that work? Or do you need to be so it's quite broad in what it can accept?
Yeah, the things I've found, and Pierre can certainly jump in here, the things I found is pi, and then of course you just have to change your letters, which are blocks. You have to change that to your curly bracket variable. So otherwise,
I think if you just go up a bit on this one to the instructions, if you just go up to the instructions, it gives you there somewhere. It doesn't.
Just about the place that you typed it into the first time. It's a little bit lower. I saw a list a little bit further down. There we go.
Oh, there, yeah.
Yeah.
So it gives you the list and how they compare to Excel, and the only ones that are different are pi and e. You don't need the brackets. So that's just the bracket thing. But when you actually try and save the answer later, it gives you a warning sign saying this syntax is incorrect, and then you go and look. So it's kind of small things. But so far, the only ones that we've really worked out with is pi, and all your angles have to be in radians. So you got to keep converting.
Yeah. I mean, you will find, well, let's see if this works. So what I normally do, and this is slightly simple. I mean, because if I was doing that whole FA value, it'd have quite a lot of, quite a lot of text in it. And when you hit save, it'll give you an error. Oh, there we go. Didn't give me an error. Brilliant. Okay. But then it will give you an error. And what's quite useful is actually using Excel. Then I'll calculate the FAT and this, and I'd put them together. So what you do is just step by step, you go through the Excel formula and you just make sure that you replace each block with a variable, and you go through like that, and you just change it. If Vula rejects it, you've got something wrong somewhere, you just do it step by step. So I'll try, now I've done FA normal. The bit more complicated one would be FA tangential. The formula for that is more complicated. So I'll try that on its own. You see, there it is. I'll try it on its own. And you can see there are only signs there really. So there's actually not too much difficult there. When I come to this part, I would then have both of these being added together using Pythagoras. And that would just be the square root function. And then I'd build it up. I'll do the one, check that's okay. I can do the other one, check that that's okay. Put them together and check that that's okay. And that's much easier to catch bugs, because if you just try and do it straight off using calculated questions, it gets ugly. So that's a little workaround which I've found.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Tar. This is one of those moments where I'm very aware of how limited my maths language is. But I'm pretty certain that everyone else in the room is probably way more comfortable than me right now. Pierre, you've been working with this for a while as well. Do you want to tell us, first of all, what was your application case for it? And then anything that you would like to particularly point out in terms of setup or use that you think is really critical for first-time users or less experienced users to know?
So the key thing for us in engineering or EBE is that you can now set questions that are a certain way unique to each student, because they need to have their own answer. And in that, it's not the fail-safe. They can still share the method with each other if they really wanted to cheat. But in a way, they've got their own answer they've got to get to every time. And so there is a feeling from students that it is unique, and that they have to calculate something and give it to us that's going to be specific to them. So we find that aspect has been really valuable in the learning experience, that there isn't just one solution for everybody. That's been the pro there. And then the next thing is, depending on how difficult you want to go, how clever you want to be. So initially, I got a bit overboard and had a whole ton of stuff that I would do. But as I've gone by, I've learned how to simplify things and make it easier for myself as I work. So as Bruce did earlier, maybe I could just share my screen, and then I can show you some of the kind of tricks of the things that I've come up with over the time. Let me see if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep, it's coming up.
All right, so this is a typical, another example, very similar to what Bruce did in terms of an energy example. We must be on the same page, Bruce. And again, you see in this question, I've got a whole lot more variables than Bruce had in the last one. So this is completely up to the person that sets the question. So in this question over here, I've got M is going to change. I've got L is going to change. And I've got, you'll see my height over here, that the answer that they're going to be given is going to be L over N. So that's just part of the question, part of the picture that we had earlier. So in this situation, I've got more variables. In this case, I've got L, M, and N. They're going to change. And I'm giving them ranges to change between. And the same thing as Brandon asked earlier, I'm giving it a certain accuracy by saying how many decimal places it's going to be written to, and then it just changes between that at that decimal place level, if you want to call it that. And then typically, like Bruce said, yeah, I've also got a theta answer in this case. And again, I did an ACOS of something, which is going to give me a radian answer. And then I have to actually go in 1/8 over pi it to make sure it comes back to degrees. And in the question, it's helpful when you write your answer, if you put units at the end there, to kind of indicate what you're going to be given the answer to in terms of when it comes to units, especially for science and EBE type students. Now, in this case, when I go look at my spreadsheet that I've drawn up, I've now got these three variables that are changing. Let me just zoom this in a little bit so you can see better. So we've got three things changing, and when I do my solution, I do my solution for one of them. And like Bruce did earlier, often there's multi-step to calculate. So in this question, I first had to calculate some speed at the bottom, where that was. And so there was a formula for that. And it involved, if you look at F2, it involved those two cells. All right. And then I had to calculate something else. And this value now, if you go and look at it, it uses those values and it uses a previous calculation that I had to do. And then I had to calculate D, and I had to use all of this to calculate theta. So theta over here is just simply a cos that C5, which is a cos that value. But that value came from previous values. Now, there's no way to set up steps in the calculated question. So what you have to do is now when you go C5 over here, whatever's in C5, all right, so it's all of this over here. You've got to go and copy and paste that and replace it in the cell with whatever C5 is. And then you've got to go and say to yourself, well, in this cell, I've got B5 and whatever's in. So what happens is you end up with, this is the calculation, just using this value. But if I want to include all the calculations, I need to go and write this formula with all of those steps in it. So this is now just the formula with none of these cells. So if I just F2 this one, you'll see that this one uses that cell. And this one's using this cell as well. But this final one I've done over here is just using some of the stuff that's going to be given to the student. So it doesn't take it, it takes into these calculations automatically. So it is quite a tricky thing to keep track of, because you need to keep track of what your B2s and your C2s in your case over here. And then only once you've got this, if you go and say to yourself, well, and this is kind of trick, whatever you label them up here to remind yourself what they're supposed to be called, then you'd go and replace B2 with L in curly brackets and your C2 with N in curly brackets. And so you can get really, really big calculations done this way, but at the end of the day, your final formula you need here needs to incorporate only things that are given in the question. Can't have intermediate steps like this. The intermediate steps need to be built into that answer, which is a pity. We've actually been asking the Vula team if they could do these kind of intermediate steps and have variables. But it's a bigger problem than Vula. It's actually a Sakai problem that we're trying to get hold of. The other thing, which is a pity, which you can't do, I'm giving limitations now.
Just before you go there, Sam was commenting on a problem in the chat. Can I ask her to jump in here, because it's related to these kind of multiple response sort of issues. Sam?
Where's the chat?
It
Sure.
disappeared as if you're presenting.
So it's actually linked to, so in this case, yeah, in this question, you've just asked for one response in the particular question, but if you had multiple multiple responses that you're asking, so if you go back, so okay, we only asking for TH,
yeah,
but if there were other ones there, at the moment there is a bug where it's not calculating 100%. So if a student fills in one response or two responses but doesn't fill in the third response, it can like misalign the scoring. So actually I think accounting found that out, because they've been using it for actually full like spreadsheet calculation. So one question involves like a whole I guess ledger type responses. So they've been using calculated questions in accounting, which has been really interesting. But then there has been some issues with the calculation of the total mark for that question. But we have filed a ticket for that, and that is being attended to by developers. So we should get that resolved in the next month or so, hopefully sooner.
Okay, so if anyone's planning on using, which I hope is not the case, planning on using this for an exam scenario this year, just be cautious of those multiple answer, multiple response options. Okay, Pierre, back to you.
Yeah, so like Sam said, once you've asked for, in this case, I've got a different question, but D or V, and you've got to calculate it. You can't use, if I've calculated, for instance, if I calculated D first, I can't use that answer in here. I've got to use all the stuff that's in here. So you can't carry answers forward, which is a pity, but it is quite complicated when you start doing that kind of thing. Now, the one thing Bruce didn't remember is if you write the answer now, you need to specify how many decimal places you want the answer to, and a tolerance. Now, this tolerance confuses the people a lot. So how am I going to write this? What this really says to me, this tolerance, is that whatever my answer was, it's going to be plus or minus this value. Now, it's an actual value. It's not a percentage or a fraction or and I think that's where the statisticians get a little bit confused. This is an actual tolerance of numbers. So what this would be was if my answer was 5.12, then my answer would be, the answers that are allowed to be given by students would be 5.13 and 5.11. In other words, I'm adding and subtracting whatever this tolerance is, and students can give an answer in that range and Vula will mark it correct. So you do allow for small miscalculations and people rounding off things. Now, depending on which course it is and how important the accuracy of the answer is, you can then be quite liberal. Like you see in this case, I've been quite strict on this value, but on this value 0.2, it's quite a broader perspective in terms of the accuracy. And then you're telling them we're doing this to 3 decimal places. So the next one over here would be where my answer would be 2, and this one's to 1. This should actually be 2. I'm not sure why that's to be. So I'm giving the answer to 2 decimal places, and it helps to tell students somewhere in the question. We normally do this at the beginning of the course, but it helps somewhere in the question to say to students, for instance, please give your answer to 2 decimal places and write that out for them. Otherwise, you get students who round off and they give an answer to no decimal places and they think it's accurate, and then Vula marks it wrong. So you want to kind of give an allowance that you can check that they're in the right ballpark, but if you're quite strict on your accuracy, you want to make sure that they're not, if they're far off, they're not going to get the question correct. You also, the thing that Sam said, so if I now go look at my question and I give this 1 mark for this whole question, it'll divide the marks equally between these 2 problems over here. So it's going to give the first one 0.5 and the second one 0.5. So I probably would be better to call this 2 marks. I'm just changing my stuff here. It's going to give 1 mark for each. So we can't allocate 2 marks for the first part and 1 mark for the second part. There's no way to split these marks up in a weighted kind of way. I'm not sure how that would be built in the future. Also, you can't, in this case, if I wanted the first part to be worth 2 marks and the second part worth 3 marks, and I wrote the question again, when Vula gives a new question, it then gives new variables for S and M and L, whatever else I've got here. In this case, MEK. So you need to build it all into one question. You can't have sequential questions that work off the same values that were given initially. We raised this with Vula as an option in the future to look at, but that's going to be a development thing. And actually, we start getting very complicated in that sense when that comes up. Now, a couple of people, this gets marked by Vula automatically. So Vula will check this value and give an answer. If you want to check yourself and you're getting students to submit written work, and this is a way to just check the initial answer, you could just put over here the answer of 0. And so everybody gets marked wrong, and then you've got to go and check by hand what is correct. But it's much better this way to get an idea of who's in the right ballpark and who's got the answer right, first of all. So then you only have to check the students that are way off and why are they way off. So those are the kind of the small things that we've had going so far. Just remember there's no equal sign before in here where Excel needs the equal sign. If you want to get really technical, what we often do is, if I look at my Excel spreadsheet, if I can just find it again, I think I've killed it. Excel spreadsheet like this, you can actually go and copy whatever's written over there, and you can just put it into a good old-fashioned notepad and just paste it. And then you can just find and replace. So if I see a C5 over here, and I go and say to myself, well, what is in C5? Well, it's all of this. I can just copy that, what's in there, and I can go back to my notepad and say, well, whatever's in C5, just replace it in that formula there. Just replace it with whatever I've just copied. And then, oh, can't find C5. Replace. There we go. So it replaces it. And this is a way to make sure that all these calculated steps are taken away and you're only left with the top things in there. And then at the end of this, if you want to go see, I've got B2 over there. If you want to go and say, I don't want B2 in my question, because when I go and paste this into Vula, my B2 is actually, and then we're going to use the curly brackets and say L. And then if I replace that, I did it again. And then over here, I'm going to have, and then I can just copy this straight into Vula as the final thing that happens. Now, there is, like all coding like this, there's a lot of error checking that needs to happen. But if you keep a spreadsheet going, It's calculating for you, just checking the whole time, are your brackets correct? And it uses the same operational precedence hierarchy as Excel, you know, brackets first, division second, multiplication third. So the Vula back engine is doing exactly the same thing that Excel does. So it's quite a nice thing to use as a backboard.
Okay, thank you so much, Pierre. So before we go any further, Bruce, you want to jump back in with anything before we take some questions? Okay, going once.
Sorry, just finding my buttons here.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Well, no, let's take questions. I have a couple other things to say, but let's take questions.
Okay, and maybe those will come up in the questions. Okay, folks, so let's open this up at that point. Is there anybody who has any particular questions for either Bruce or Pierre about how they've used the calculated questions tool that you want to jump in with?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Hi. Okay, so first questions on, oh, by the way, thanks for the presentation. It's quite interesting. Firstly, on the formatting, can you put in pictures? And I saw something about LaTeX. Is LaTeX, say you want to put a small degree sign, you know, is that possible in this system?
I just closed it now. Let me go and open it again quickly, and then just going to open any relative one. Yeah, sorry. Yes, you can. So the only problem with the LaTeX is it's good to write formulas, but you can't specify the variables in LaTeX. I'll just show you what I mean there. Let me just go and edit something quickly and share my screen again. So if I just go and edit one of these questions, I'm just going to take a random question and edit it. So when I'm typing in over here, if I was typing my question, you are given the option to, with the formula sign here, to use math type. It'll take a while to come up. It always seems to. And then you can actually specify with all the normal things you could do. You could write A over B, and then when you go and paste it in, you can see it gives it in that format. The only thing is you can't, anything that's got these curly brackets around them, you can't specify in the math editor, because Vula can't read in the math editor that it needs that as a variable. So curly brackets L for this case. If I wrote it in the math editor, it won't recognize it. So I can't, this won't work if it's in the actual equation. The equation is a standalone unit by itself, so it won't recognize A as a variable now. So that's the only problem with that part of the LaTeX side.
Okay.
Like you see, I've got a degree sign here. That's been inputted with the symbols. There's a whole lot of symbols you can input. Not the full array you get in other symbol, but enough. There's more than enough here. I can't think of where I've come stuck. So the degree symbols here, sorry, the degree symbols here. You can have over here superscript and subscript. You'll see some of the units possibly somewhere. No, I don't have a superscript, subscript. So we can have, you know, meters squared. And so you can just, that works all right. And so you have to kind of write this in a little bit of a DOS format when you set it up initially, but you do have superscripts and subscripts to work with it. Does that answer your question? Is that right?
Yep, yeah, that's
the other thing was about pictures. Maybe I could say something about that.
yeah.
So, or Pierre, you want to?
Oh, sorry.
You want to share a screen?
So I just, you want to stop sharing?
Yeah, well, you can. No, it's okay. I'm just gonna share like this. Yeah. So what I do, and I actually saw now that Pierre does something differently. If you can actually paste pictures into this question box, but they don't come out when the student is actually doing the test. So it looks nice when you're setting it up, but somehow the students can't actually see that. So that doesn't really help. And what I do, and I think Pierre does it differently, but what I do is I actually have a part here before, just I think this is just the part. Yeah, I add a part, And then over here, I have an image which I upload. So if you edit it over here, you just edit it and then you just upload your image there. So the students will see the image above the question. But I think, Pierre, I think I saw you actually adding the image within the calculated question as an attachment. And that's how you have to do it. You have to actually add it as an attachment, not inline in the text box.
Bruce,
Yeah,
I managed
so
to get to
I
work.
do mine inline. I'm just warn you if I'm going to show you what mine looks like. So you'll see my question. Yeah, there's a point to add or remove attachments, and so you can add or remove an attachment, an image file or whatever else you want over there. So there's my JPEG file that I've put in there. It's been saved already, and so it's part of the question answer. When I go and preview this test, which is quite a good thing for you guys to see. So I'm previewing what I've done over here, and yes, I'm honest that I'm going to do this properly. So again, this is what a question would look like. That's the input box for students. And let's go to this question that I did earlier. The problem you have, Gotcha, is when you save your image, you need to save it in a specific size. If you don't realize you've got a very big image, Vula just puts it in the size you saved it in. So sometimes I've got to save these images to a specific size so they look about this size, they fit on a mobile phone. But every now and then I forget to, and then this image will take up basically the whole page. So Vula only restricts the width of it to what your page is. So if you save your images when you do get them, just save them to, and I forget what my actual size format is. In this question, you'll see, this is as if I'm a student now, it's got a mass of 1.87. So I've specified that the mass must be somewhere between 1.5, I think, and 2. I see the meter signs are missing here. And then you see over here, this will go and work this out for me. It'll actually give me a number when I go and do it. So that's the stuff that's done behind the scenes. So a student can't see which of these variables are picked up by Vula, which ones you've put in yourself. So, I mean, it's quite obvious. I put 100 in here, and this is 0.056. Looks like something that Vula's generated. But you could, when you write these numbers in your question, you could make it look like Vula generated them by just giving them odd numbers, you know, something that isn't a rounded off number. And then the student puts the answer in, yeah, whatever the number is, 12 and whatever the case is. And then when they submit at the end, it'll then look at those values and mark them. And again, you'll see I put units at the end here. So you can just attach the, so Bruce has his images in a part above it, but when you actually put it in the question, it starts with the image and then gives you the text and expects the answer somewhere in the middle.
Thank you, Pierre. I see two hands, Brandon and then Sam. So Brandon first and then Sam after.
Thank you. Pierre, the question that the image that you got displayed there, when you close out of that, is that just added as an attachment and then it auto displays in that position?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I found when I was trying to put inline images in, the reason why it wasn't showing because the students actually didn't have the rights to see the image in the place that it was located. So that was quite a crazy few moments for me to try and work out how to do that. But as soon as I found out where they were stored and then made that unhidden, then it was available to everybody. Of course, tricky in an exam because you don't want the students to see the pictures beforehand. But that's why they weren't showing in line, because students didn't have rights to see them, even though I could see them because I had the rights to see them. They didn't, and so that was a bit of a nightmare. So what you've done there is very useful for me. Thank you.
Thanks.
So just a heads up about this, because I think Sam and I were chatting about this in a different conversation. Some folks are using a separate Vula site for their exams, so they can set up things like folders openly and test them, rather than making that visible to students on their course sites. So just to be aware that that is a route that one can go. Sam, you had a hand.
Sure. So, oh, sorry, dogs. So it was also related to the images, because the images does actually come up as a frequently encountered issue, and the attachments is definitely the best way to go. So how Pierre and Bruce have shown now, The problem with the inserting it is like a copy and paste or something, is that it pops it in resources or somewhere, and then students don't have permissions to that. And then some people set it to hidden but not accessible, or hidden but accessible. So there's a whole level of permissions in that. So yes, having a separate course site is one way, but also if you want to reuse any of your assessments, like in question pools and stuff, or for next year, it's going to reference those resources from previous year sites. So it just gets it can get really complicated. So where at all possible, just do the attachments style, and like make sure that it's in the right size. So the other way is to set the images to like public, but that would obviously, you have to make sure that that folder is still hidden. Anyway, it's a little bit complicated with permissions, so I'd recommend attachments. And then just on the LaTeX side, so there's two ways to enter LaTeX. So there's the one in the WYSIWYG, the rich text editor. So there was that icon at the bottom of your rich text editor, which is like a little equation one. So I said Akias had a question about adding a fraction. I think that was linked to the equations. And then so that is actually an external tool that is bringing in that equation and creating like an image to it. And then the other way is actually LaTeX directly in Vula, which needs to be enabled. But so I've added a link to that, but then you have to write in LaTeX notation. So you have to be very familiar with how that is formulated. Yeah, so those are just my 2 comments.
Sorry, Sam, would you then write the LaTeX formula? How would you specify there's now going to be a LaTeX formula? Is there a...
Yeah, I think it's you can use square brackets. I think it's square something like this, or it could be the other way around. Sorry, I don't do it very often. Or the other way is this, but I think the first one works a bit better. I think it's this way.
Yeah. I mean, the only problem with this formula inserter, which we still haven't figured out how to get right, is if I put a formula somewhere in my, and I use the math type editor, I'll just put something in here. This is for the OCD people amongst us. When you do put something like this in, don't wait for it to catch up. It's just a little bit above, so it's got this zoom in there. This is probably OCD though. You can see it's like not superscript, but it's just sort of offset a bit above. So whenever you put a formula in, for some reason, we can't get it to line up with the text. And we've tried everything. I've spent enough time trying to get a PhD on this that I haven't got it to work. So we're not sure why. We're not sure why that has got this kind of raised for whatever reason. We can't figure it out, and it doesn't make really much of a difference, other than, like I said, the OCD people amongst us that see that and cringe.
It just looks really messy.
Yeah, it's actually converting it into an image, so that's why.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, I think there was one more question in the text that I just want to pull out for us. Where has it gone? Inserting a fraction. Akios is saying that they missed the part on how you insert a fraction. I don't know. Akios, has that been answered? Have we got that?
Is it a question or an answer? So again, the fraction part, if you want to do a half and you want to just superscript subscript it, that's the kind of the cheap and nasty way to do it in that sense. And if you do it with the editor, you've got these options of, you can put it side by side or one on top of the other one. So again, these are the various options that you can write. It's catching up on me. Maybe not. Come along. Vula's were hanging for a while. Somebody must be doing a test somewhere at UCT. Maybe just cancel that and start again. Yeah, so these are the different ways, and you could write it either in this different style, like that. Those are the best ways to get fractions out. again, just the only thing with this, you can see the different font size when you do it this way, when you use the editor compared to just writing it. Oops, sorry, writing it in straight gloss text. No, it's not liking this half at all. Oh well, doesn't like a half that way. Oh, there we go. So that's a way to put fractions in if you want to.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so colleagues, any last questions for Pierre or Bruce? Any comments? Thank you. Pierre, I'm going to just grab the screen quickly. Let's see if I can. I may not be able to. Yes, I can. So what I've been trying to do as Pierre and Bruce have been talking is I've been trying to make some notes about the things that you highlighted, which I will share back with the group, and I'll share it as a commentable presentation. So please feel free to continue to add to it. Yeah, I want to say in closing, if there are no more questions, I don't see any hands. I want to say a huge thank you to Bruce and Pierre for being willing to come and chat through calculated questions. I have no reason in my life, sadly, to use them. And so I have zero experience with them from an educator lecturer perspective. So it was lovely to have both of you here to chat through how you have used them. Just because it is always so much nicer to have actual lived experience of a question or question type or a tool before we go off recommending it to other people. There are in the room some folks who are possibly a little bit new to the process of using calculated questions or possibly just Vula in general. So a couple of things that I want to emphasize in closing. Please remember that if you're going to use question types like this, it is really important that you do a trial run with your students first in some kind of low risk way, so that if there's a problem, for example, an image disappears or something like that, you have an opportunity to fix that before your students have a formal assessment with it. Please remember you can book one-on-one hands-on help consultations to talk about some of the question types that are open to you, any kind of assessment challenges you may be having. I will send this to everybody in an email after this so that you will be able to find the links for those. We're also doing Zoom room office hours. Just drop in on Friday afternoons between 1:30 and I think 3, but I will confirm that and send that through to you. Yeah, 1:30 and 3. And then if you have any additional queries, please remember that your very first port of call for anything that kind of glitches with a calculated question is our lovely colleagues at Help at Vula. Okay, but in closing then, thank you both Bruce and Pierre so much for being willing to give up some time and to share your experiences with us. It has been lovely seeing you, and I will send around an extract of the recording along with some resources. Bruce, Pierre, any closing thoughts?
Thank you so much, Sonali. No, it was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks to the master.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. Have a lovely day, everybody. Take care, and we will see you all at some other online event at some time in the near future, I'm sure. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Cheers, Bruce.
Bye. Room will close shortly. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.